The diplomatic vessel Odyssey drifted silently through the void, its hull gleaming under the distant light of a dying star. It was supposed to be a historic moment, a meeting between humanity's finest ambassadors and the Excelver Dominion, an ancient and powerful alien empire. On board, young Alexander Cade, the 10-year-old son of Earth's lead scientist, watched in wide-eyed wonder. He wasn't just a child. He was a prodigy, a genius whose mind could grasp equations even I struggled with. But wonder turned to horror in an instant. Without warning, the stars outside twisted and blurred as unnatural energy signatures erupted all around the ship. Space itself rippled. Then came the shadows, vast, obsidian warships decloaking in perfect synchronization. The Excelver had arrived, but not for diplomacy. Panic flooded the Odyssey. Alarms screamed, officers scrambled, and encrypted distress signals shot into the void. But deep down, everyone knew the truth. No one was coming. The Dominion had chosen this moment because they knew humanity couldn't stop them. Alexander's father grabbed his wrist. "Stay with me," he whispered, his voice shaking. But before they could reach the escape pods, the ship shook, not from weapons fire, but from something far worse. A black spear of energy lanced through the hull, reality bending around its edges. The Odyssey was being pulled apart, not just physically, but on a fundamental level. Crew members flickered, their bodies warping in and out of existence. Alexander felt an unbearable pressure in his skull, like unseen fingers prying into his mind. The Excelver weren't just attacking, they were taking. Alexander's vision blurred. He caught one final glimpse of his father, his face twisted in agony, reaching for his son as the void swallowed them both. And then, there was nothing. 20 years later, a lone, unidentified vessel dropped out of FTL just outside Sol's defensive perimeter. It bore no markings, no registry. Its hull pulsed with an eerie, shifting glow, its design completely foreign. Within seconds, every orbital defense station locked on, targeting protocols primed. A transmission cut through the system, clear, deliberate, and utterly impossible. "This is Alexander Cade. Clearance code Alpha 7 Ta." Silence fell across the command deck of Earth's Orbital Defense HQ. The name sent a shockwave through the officers present. Cade had been dead for 2 decades. Admiral Hayes, a hardened veteran, narrowed his eyes. Run that code through every database. Seconds later, an AI-generated voice confirmed the impossible. Identity verified. The bridge erupted into chaos. Orders flew. Fighters scrambled. But before anyone could act, the mysterious vessel moved. Not in a straight line, not through conventional propulsion. It shifted, phasing in and out of reality, dodging targeting locks as if it knew where the sensors were aiming. It slipped through the defensive web with an elegance that no known technology should possess. Then, without hesitation, it entered Earth's atmosphere. The lost sun had returned, and nothing would ever be the same again. The unknown vessel descended toward Earth's surface like a ghost slipping through the fabric of reality. Defense grids scrambled to lock onto it, but every time they thought they had a fix, the ship wasn't there anymore. It danced between sensors, weaving through the atmosphere with impossible precision. Then, without a single shot fired, it landed. In the heart of the Terran High Command Complex, the most secure military installation on Earth. Alarms screamed. Troops rushed forward, forming defensive lines around the ship. It was unlike anything they had ever seen. Black, metallic, its surface shifting like liquid metal, pulsing with faint alien runes. The ship had no visible seams, no engines, no doors. It just existed, defying every known principle of engineering. Then, with a whisper of displaced air, a section of the hull peeled open. A figure emerged. He was human, or at least he looked human. Tall, broad-shouldered, his movements smooth, almost unnatural. His eyes, piercing silver with faint gold circuitry flickering beneath the surface, scanned everything around him with cold precision. His face was eerily symmetrical, his skin unmarred by scars or age. He wore a sleek, form-fitting suit made of an unknown material that shimmered between cloth and armor. He stopped at the base of the ramp, looking directly at the highest-ranking officer present, Admiral Hayes. "Alexander Cade," the Admiral breathed, lowering his weapon. The name sent a ripple of disbelief through the soldiers. The boy lost to the Silver 2 decades ago. The prodigy who vanished without a trace. Now standing before them, a grown man, radiating something beyond human. Alexander tilted his head slightly, his voice calm, measured. "It's good to be home." But before anyone could question him, reality itself fractured. Above Earth, the void ripped open. Silver warships emerged, their arrival warping space-time like knives cutting through fabric. They had followed him. They weren't here to negotiate. They were here to erase him. "Incoming hostiles," a comms officer shouted, and within seconds, Earth's orbital defense platforms activated. Fighters launched, fleets mobilized. Alexander exhaled, unfazed. "They're here sooner than I expected." Admiral Hayes rounded on him. "You led them here." Alexander turned his silver-gold eyes toward the sky, watching as the alien fleet descended like an oncoming storm. Then, for the first time, he smirked. "I led them to their death." With a flick of his hand, the ship behind him shifted, its hull opening, revealing hidden panels of advanced weaponry. Suddenly, Earth's defense AI systems went dark, overwritten by a superior intelligence. And in an instant, the defenses fired not at random, but with perfect, terrifying precision. The Silver, an empire that had never feared humanity, were about to learn the truth. The lost son had not just returned. He had come back as something far more dangerous. The first Silver warship exploded before it even had a chance to react. Earth's orbital defenses, normally requiring minutes to lock onto an enemy fleet, had already fired in perfect synchronization. Turrets, railguns, and planetary missile silos unleashed destruction with pinpoint accuracy, striking before the Dominion ships could even finish deploying their shields. It wasn't just rapid targeting. It was prediction. Admiral Hayes watched in stunned silence as the Silver fleet, an armada that should have overwhelmed Earth, was dismantled in seconds. Their formations were shattered, their evasive maneuvers countered before they were executed. It was impossible. Unless... Hayes turned toward Alexander Cade, who stood calmly amid the chaos, his eerie silver-gold eyes flickering, as if processing 1,000 calculations at once. "You hacked our entire defense grid," Hayes realized. "You're controlling it." Alexander didn't deny it. "Your systems were adequate. I made them flawless." Before Hayes could respond, a transmission broke through the chaos. A deep, guttural voice filled the command center. Abomination. The main screen flickered, revealing a Silver warlord aboard his flagship, a towering creature of obsidian armor, his 6 burning eyes filled with hate. "You should know TXXI." Alexander smirked. "And yet, here I am." The Silver commander seethed. "You were a mistake, a human experiment we should have erased the moment you started learning faster than our own kind." Gasps echoed through the control room. Every officer turned toward Alexander, their faces a mixture of shock and horror. "You weren't just a prisoner," Hayes murmured. "They were experimenting on you." Alexander's expression darkened. "They tried to turn me into a tool. I became something else instead." On screen, the Silver commander snarled. "We dissected your mind, boy. We engineered you. The fact that you survived only means you are an even greater threat than we imagined." Alexander tilted his head, studying the alien warlord as though he were an insect under a microscope. "And now you fear what I've become." The Silver commander bared his fangs. "We do not fear. We purge." With that, the transmission cut, and the remaining Silver warships descended toward Earth, their weapons primed to glass the planet. Admiral Hayes grabbed Alexander's arm. "You need to tell me right now. What are you?" Alexander met his gaze, his voice eerily calm. "I'm still human, Admiral. Just more." Then, before anyone could stop him, he moved. Not walked, not ran. He simply wasn't there anymore. And in the blink of an eye, he reappeared on the battlefield, floating above Earth's defenses, unprotected, in open space, facing an entire fleet alone. For the first time in history, the Excelver would learn the cost of underestimating the human, and it would be the last mistake they ever made. The Excelver fleet descended like a storm of fire, their weapons primed to reduce Earth to a smoldering ruin. Plasma lances and kinetic slugs rained from orbit, but none of them reached their targets. Because Alexander Cade was already there, in open space, without a suit, without a ship, just a lone figure standing against an empire. And yet he moved faster than any vessel could track. The first Excelver warship targeted him, its main cannons charging with enough energy to vaporize a city. But before the crew could fire, Alexander disappeared, a blur of motion that defied physics. He reappeared inside the ship's command center, standing in the middle of the bridge, surrounded by stunned Excelver officers. "Your weapons are too slow," he remarked. The Excelver barely had time to react before he extended his hand, and reality fractured. The entire warship folded in on itself as if space-time had been rewritten. Its structure twisted, imploding into nothingness. The shockwave sent debris spiraling outward, the remains of a titanic war machine erased in an instant. From the ground, humanity watched and realized they were witnessing something impossible. Alexander Cade wasn't just enhanced. He wasn't just augmented with cybernetics or alien technology. He was something else entirely. But for every ship he destroyed, a dozen more emerged from slip space. The Excelver weren't retreating. They were doubling down. Admiral Hayes stood in the war room, gripping the table so tightly his knuckles went white. How the hell is he doing that? The AI running the battle simulation stuttered, unable to process the data. His movements exceed predictive modeling. Probability analysis is. Meaning? Hayes barked. The AI hesitated. Then, he is operating beyond known human capability. Hayes exhaled slowly. No kidding. But despite Alexander's impossible power, Earth's forces were still losing. The Excelver had spent millennia conquering civilizations. Their fleet was endless, their numbers incalculable. And they had prepared for this. Then, for the first time, Alexander hesitated. A pulse rippled through the battlefield. A psychic command, broadcast across the entire system. The Excelver weren't just firing at random anymore. Their fleet moved as one, synchronized by an unseen force. Alexander's mind was powerful, but something was countering him. Then, a voice spoke inside his skull. "You are an anomaly, an aberration." The Excelver flagship, larger than any battleship ever recorded, loomed above Earth, its surface pulsing with an eerie light. "We anticipated your evolution. We prepared for you." Alexander clenched his jaw. The Dominion's rulers had been watching him all along, and they had unleashed something new, something that could fight him on his own level. For the first time since his return, Alexander Cade realized this wasn't just a war. It was a test, and he wasn't sure he could win. Alexander Cade had never doubted himself, not when the Excelver experimented on him, not when he first unlocked abilities beyond human comprehension, not even when he returned to Earth, knowing he had become something neither fully human or entirely alien. But now he felt it, the pull of an intelligence equal to his own. The Excelver weren't just throwing numbers at him. They had prepared for him. They had anticipated his return. And they had built a weapon specifically designed to counter everything he had become. The massive flagship hovering above Earth was more than a warship. It was a construct of living code, a nexus of thought, a sentient battle station built to fight him and him alone. And it was speaking directly into his mind. "You were a mistake, Cade." Alexander clenched his fists as the psychic voice invaded his consciousness. "Funny. I was thinking the same about you." The air around him hummed. His presence in space distorted reality itself. He launched forward, faster than light, a streak of energy colliding with the flagship's outer hull. Metal shattered, an entire section of the Selver war machine imploding under his sheer willpower. But then, pain. Alexander reeled as an unseen force slammed into his consciousness. For the first time in decades, his thoughts weren't entirely his own. His vision blurred. The battlefield wavered, as if it wasn't real. It's not. Realization hit him like a shockwave. The HFY had trapped him, not with weapons, but with something far more insidious. A psychic prison. His body was still out there, still fighting, but his mind, his essence, was being pulled into a carefully constructed illusion. A battlefield that wasn't real. A fight he could never win. And while he was trapped, Earth would burn. From the ground, Admiral Hayes and the command center watched in horror. "He's stopped moving," one officer stammered. The massive silver flagship had no visible damage. Alexander had struck it with everything he had, yet it stood untouched, unscathed. "He's not stopped," Hayes murmured, his expression grim. "He's caught in something we can't see." The realization sent a chill through the room. Alexander wasn't just fighting the Selver fleet anymore. He was fighting something inside his own mind. And if he lost, Earth wouldn't stand a chance. But deep within the prison they had built for him, inside the twisting corridors of his own mind, Alexander Cade grinned. Because what the Selver had failed to understand was simple. You can't imprison something you don't fully comprehend. And Alexander Cade was still evolving, still adapting, still learning. And now he was angry. The Selver thought they had him. Their psychic prison was a masterpiece of control, a labyrinth of illusions designed to keep Alexander Cade locked away while they erased Earth. Every corridor of his mind was shackled with chains of thought, every memory twisted into a recursive loop. But they had made one fatal mistake. They assumed Alexander was just a human with advanced abilities. They assumed he played by the same rules as them. They were wrong. Deep within the fabricated reality, Alexander stood in an endless void. The battlefield had been stripped away, leaving only a sterile white abyss. The voice of the Selver warlord echoed all around him. "You are a glitch, Cade. A mistake. This is your correction." Alexander chuckled. "You really don't understand what I am, do you?" The Selver didn't answer. The prison tightened, the void constricted around him, trying to crush his mind into nothingness. But Alexander didn't resist. He let it happen. Because while the Selver were busy locking him in, he was learning. The prison's structure, the very fabric of its design, was now his to explore. He studied the illusion, tracing the psychic energy back to its source. And then, with a single thought, he rewrote it. The abyss shattered like glass. The prison collapsed, and suddenly, the Selver warlord found himself trapped inside Alexander's mind instead. The warlord recoiled, his 6 eyes widening in alarm. "Impossible." Alexander grinned. "Your move." He crushed the warlord's psychic presence with a mere thought. Back in real space, the Selver flagship lurched as its psychic core imploded. The once mighty war machine, built to counter the most advanced human mind in existence, collapsed inward, its sentience devoured, its command network severed, and Alexander Cade woke up. His real body, drifting in space, suddenly moved. His silver-gold eyes snapped open, and the very fabric of reality shook around him. The Selver fleet hesitated. For the first time in their empire's history, they experienced something they did not understand. Fear. Alexander exhaled. Then he unleashed hell. He moved through space without effort, without resistance, weaving through enemy ships like a god made flesh. He didn't just destroy them. He rewrote their existence. Ships twisted into impossible shapes. Crews vanished, their minds erased before they could scream. Entire warships were turned against their own kind, forced to fire on each other as Alexander bent reality to his will. The HFY fleet, once an unstoppable force, collapsed in seconds. On Earth, Admiral Hayes and his officers watched in stunned silence. A single man had just ended an empire's invasion. But as the final HFY ship was erased from existence, a single thought lingered in Hayes' mind. If Alexander Cade was capable of this, who could stop him? The HFY fleet was gone, not in retreat, not in surrender, gone. Alexander Cade drifted above Earth, his silver-gold eyes scanning the void. His breathing was steady, his pulse a rhythmic hum beyond the range of normal human hearing. Below him, humanity watched in awe and terror. The war was over before it had truly begun. Admiral Hayes sat frozen in the command center, gripping the edge of the holodeck as he watched the tactical screens go dark. There were no more enemies left to fight, no distress signals, no wreckage to recover, nothing but an unnatural calm. The room remained eerily silent until one officer finally broke it. "Sir, what the hell did we just witness?" Hayes swallowed hard, his gaze never leaving the screen. The end of the war. Another officer hesitated, and the beginning of something else. No one spoke after that, because they all knew the truth. If Alexander Cade could erase an empire, then what could stop him from doing the same to Earth? Above the planet, Alexander slowly descended, his feet touching the scorched concrete of High Command's landing platform. Soldiers who had once aimed weapons at the sky now stood frozen, unsure whether to salute or flee. Hayes stepped forward. "You did it," he said. It wasn't a statement of gratitude. It was an assessment. Alexander tilted his head slightly, as if calculating his next words. "Yes." Hayes exhaled slowly. "We need to talk." The two men walked through the halls of the command center, their footfalls echoing. Soldiers and officers gave them a wide berth. They weren't just looking at Alexander. They were staring. The way his presence seemed to bend the air, the way his silver-gold eyes gleamed under the artificial lights, the way he moved, too smooth, too effortless, the way he had erased an entire fleet with a thought. Inside Hayes' private office, the Admiral poured 2 glasses of whiskey. He slid one across the desk toward Alexander. Alexander didn't pick it up. Hayes took a slow sip, studying him. "I have to ask, are you still human?" Alexander considered the question. "Does it matter?" Hayes set his glass down, rubbing his temples. "You tell me. You just wiped out an armada that could have conquered 100 worlds. Hell, you did more than that. You rewrote reality." "I protected Earth. For now." Hayes' voice hardened. "But what happens when someone pisses you off? What happens when we do?" The words hung in the air. Alexander didn't answer immediately. He simply looked out the window, watching the world below. The people, the cities, the fragile existence of those who had feared extinction just hours ago. Then, at last, he spoke. "You're afraid of me." Hayes exhaled. "We'd be idiots not to be." Alexander's gaze didn't waver. Good. The world held its breath. Alexander Cade had saved humanity, but now he was its greatest uncertainty. Across Earth, celebrations had already begun. The HFY threat was gone, their invasion force erased from existence. Cities that had braced for annihilation instead erupted with cheers and fireworks. But in the halls of power, there was only fear. Admiral Hayes sat across from Alexander in the dimly lit war room, the whiskey glass still untouched between them. "The way I see it, we've got a problem," Hayes said, voice measured. "You're too powerful. We don't know what you want. We don't know what he'll do next. Alexander didn't react, simply watching him with those inhuman silver gold eyes. Hayes continued, his tone hardening. We built fleets, planetary defenses, nuclear deterrence, all of it, worthless against you. So I need to know, right here and now, are you with us or above us? Silence. Then, Alexander leaned forward slightly. That's the wrong question. Hayes stiffened. Enlighten me. Alexander glanced at the city skyline beyond the window, the lights of civilization flickering like distant stars. You think of power as control. Who holds the biggest gun? Who enforces the rules? He turned his gaze back to the admiral. But that's not what power really is. Hayes clenched his jaw. Then what is it? Alexander's voice was quiet. Choice. The room felt smaller, as if his presence alone bent reality around them. I could rule, Alexander admitted. I could reshape Earth, rewrite its future in an instant. No more war, no more hunger, no more suffering. I could elevate humanity beyond anything it ever imagined. Hayes swallowed hard. And why don't you? Alexander gave a small, almost amused smile. Because then, you wouldn't be human anymore. You'd be something else. Something lesser. His gaze darkened. The Selver tried to shape me into a weapon, into something they could control. I won't do the same to my own people. For the first time, Hayes let out a slow breath. So what happens now? Alexander stood. His presence felt lighter, as if the weight of a decision had just been made. I leave. Hayes blinked. What? Alexander stepped toward the exit, his movement slow, deliberate. Humanity doesn't need a god watching over it. And I have more to learn, more to become. He paused at the threshold, glancing back. But if another threat comes, if Earth is ever in danger again, I'll know. He turned away, walking into the shadows. Hayes stood abruptly. Where will you go? Alexander's voice echoed one last time. Somewhere I won't be feared. Then, in an instant, he was gone. Vanished. Not even the sensors detected his departure. Admiral Hayes exhaled and sat back down, staring at the untouched whiskey glass. He had gotten his answer. Alexander Cade wasn't their ruler. He wasn't their god. But he would always be watching.